Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast.
Welcome to the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. This is the first podcast of the year 2023. 2022 was a good year. I completed two major projects, Micronation and Swamp Castle, the audiobooks of which are available on the audiobook playlist on my YouTube channel. Let's start with a writing update. So, I am currently writing Army of Fire, which is the first of probably 5 books. And so far, it's taken me about 2 years to write this thing. I'm 51 years old, and at the rate I'm going, it's going to be a while, especially since I plan to finish the first 3 books before I release the first one. Now, I'm doing some things with these books that I haven't done previously, but even though I'm nearly finished with this book, I don't have much of a market in the sense that my readership is not as wide as some more successful authors, but I do want to respond to my audience. And when I look at the numbers for the podcast, the top 3 things that I see are that the most popular thing I've ever written, both in terms of sales and in terms of the numbers on the YouTube channel and the podcast, is Grenade Man versus the Zombies. And some of that is the fabulous talent of the voice actor Matt Smith, Mark Smith, but some of it is also the nature of how ridiculous Grenade Man is and how much fun I have writing it, and it comes across, and some of it is how competent Jarvie is as a villain, because I hate stupid villains unless there's a compelling reason for them to be in the story. So, long story short, I've long had a project in the back burner that regular listeners of the podcast will have heard of called The Book of Heliotropic Fairy Tales, which has always been planned to be an anthology similar to the colored fairy books like the Red Book of Fairy Tales, the Blue Book of Fairy Tales, etc., etc. That there's 3 that are planned: the Heliotropic Book of Fairy Tales, the Onyx Book of Fairy Tales, and the Chrome Book of Fairy Tales. Each of which will have a novella in it of around probably 50,000 to 70,000 words, advancing the Grenade Man versus Jarvie, or Order versus Chaos, or, who knows what twists and turns may happen with the conflict between those two, and of course that therefore means there will be. But that's going to be the next thing I write. Because even though I do have interest in Inglemia, and even though I'm going to be editing Army of Fire, I may be writing more than one novel at a time. My writing speed is not prolific without knowing that there's an intended audience. And while I do have fans, and I do have people that are interested in these projects, none of them are what I would call hardcore. I don't have anybody emailing me every day saying, "Where's Army of Fire? Where's Army of Fire?" Or, for that matter, "Where's Grenade Man?" So, there's that. I have 2 other writing projects I want to do, which are pretty neat, but I think there's another reason to take a pause and focus on the Grenade Man thing and start working on the Book of Heliotropic Fairy Tales, and that is that the second book in the Inglemia series and the second book in Have Name Will Travel both involve lots of history and politics. Armor of Stone is going to be a constitutional convention for Inglemia, which is kind of neat because basically you're having a fantasy political thing. The closest I've seen to anything like that would be the vampire books. I can't remember. I'm forgetting the name of the series, but there's a series on, The Declaration of the Rights of Magicians, which is just absolutely fabulous. A little dry, but still fabulous. But that's not really about the rights of magicians. That's really more about vampires in the Enlightenment and how magic is a very good mirror for the nastiness of slavery. But still a fascinating book. But it's not really about the constitutional politics of fantasy high magic. And trust me when I say that Inglemia is about as high magic a setting as you're going to find, short of maybe the Vlad Tolstos books have higher magic. But not many settings I'm aware of have more magic than this setting. And just like a Superman story, when the power level gets that high, the story is about the people, not the power. Even though the power does have a factor in the story, right? A Superman story might focus on him trying to rescue somebody, Lois Lane or Jimmy Olsen or the bus full of children, right? But it still does have Superman powers in it. You can't have an Englemian novel without absurdly high levels of magic doing absurdly, ridiculously powerful things. The other thing that I'm doing in the podcast, aside from starting Project NIMBY, I'm going to do the 7 stories I did from that chapbook. The poetry I am saving for the book itself. If being a beta reader for Army of Fire or the poetry for that in audio recording interests you, please feel free to email me at redanvilcreative.com. The other major project I'm doing this year is I'm going to be reading 2 new things. I'm going to be reading Heir of Sunfire, which I think at this point I am never going to publish. It's kind of the Hobbit to the 3 fairy tale books that I'm going to be creating. And I just don't think it fits in what I'm thinking. I mean, eventually, if the 3 books become very popular, I might release it. But it's kind of the glue that holds Army of Zombies versus Grenade Man running around in a fantasy setting together. It's the next setting of where Jarvie and Grenade Man and a whole bunch of other characters that you've never heard of, but I hope you fall in love with in Heir of Sunfire, will, be fighting the ever-ending battle of good versus evil. The other project, and this one's going to be a lot more complicated and last a lot longer, probably into next year. I'm going to do at least 52 episodes, which every other week means basically, 2 years worth of work, is Rhombus Tix's Constitutional History of Terra. I've mentioned this a couple of times in the past episodes of the podcast, but to summarize, it's basically going to be 20 to 30 minute episodes, 10 to 15 minute humorous segment of something ridiculous involving constitutional reform and what caused it, kind of a History Channel mockumentary, and then 10 to 20 minutes of me ranting. I'm going to try and keep the ranting to explaining my point and why I think that element is necessary for a new constitution, or how we can implement a new constitution, or both. I think that I have some very strong ideas on this, and I've been doing some research on it for a very long time. And just like the Sins of Silicon Valley, I'm looking forward to see how it goes. I will be updating the blog more with writing statuses. You probably won't hear a status update like this from me for a while, but I may also do some more poetry things on Wednesday.
This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. Buy my book, Have Name Will Travel, at Amazon and other markets. RedAnvilCreative.com contains all our podcasts. Copyright
2023.
To fight the forces of evil!